Daughter's best friend showed up crying with boxes. One look inside and I knew everything. Turns out my daughter had an affair with her boyfriend. Now I'm struggling to understand how it all went wrong. So my daughter Tina has had this best friend Maya since she was 9. They were practically attached at the hip, honestly. I don't even remember a time when Maya wasn't around our house. If you came by on any random day, you'd find her there, just as comfortable as Tina. She had her own spot at the dinner table, her own blanket on the couch, and a key to our house. Yeah, a key. I mean, it's not something I do lightly, but Maya was like family to us at some point. It stopped feeling like Maya was just a friend and more like I had a second daughter. She was there for every little moment, birthday parties, holidays, even our family reunions. And she never just came to hang out with Tina, she'd spend time with all of us. My wife loved having her around, and honestly, I did too. She was just one of those kids who felt like they belonged. You know, Maya had this big, bright personality that filled the room. She was always smiling, always kind, and seemed genuinely grateful to be part of our lives. If Tina was our little spark, Maya was the steady flame. They'd spend hours together watching movies, talking about school, playing games, or whatever it is that teenage girls do. Their friendship was something I admired. It seemed like it would last forever. Now, Tina and Maya's personalities were a bit different, but they balanced each other out. Tina's more of a dreamer, sometimes a little impulsive, and Maya was the grounded one, the type who'd help Tina think things through. I'd always figured that Maya was a great influence on Tina because, honestly, I could see that my daughter sometimes got lost in her head. Maya was the friend who'd pull her back down to earth, keeping her level-headed. In fact, there were times when Maya would come over to the house even if Tina wasn't around. I'd come home from work, walk in, and there she'd be, chatting with my wife or hanging out with my younger son. At first, I thought it was a little strange, but Maya just fit in so well with all of us. She'd sit there at the kitchen counter helping with dinner or even doing her homework while we all went about our evening routine. I don't think any of us ever questioned it, we just accepted it. I mean, what kind of family wouldn't want a kid like her around? As the years went by, it became clear that Maya wasn't just Tina's friend, she was a big part of our family, and we treated her like it. She joined us on every family trip, even the family reunions. I remember one time at a reunion, Maya and Tina were playing some silly game with my younger nieces and nephews, and my mom, Tina's grandma, called Maya her other granddaughter. It was just that natural, like she'd always been part of our family tree. It wasn't only us who saw it this way, either. Maya's parents were lovely people, don't get me wrong, but they were always busy. They traveled a lot for work and weren't home much. From what I gathered, they weren't super close to Maya in the way we were with her. I think they liked knowing she had a second family she could rely on. Whenever I'd see them, they'd thank us for taking such good care of Maya and for treating her like one of our own. They were genuinely grateful, and I was happy to do it. Now, if there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I don't throw the word family around lightly, but Maya, she earned it. She was around for some tough times too. When my wife had surgery a few years back, Maya was right there helping us out. She'd bring over dinner, help clean up, even take care of the dog for a while. She didn't have to, but she did it because she cared, and it meant the world to us. Then there were the little moments that showed just how close they were. Tina once got really sick, like a bad flu that had her out for days. Maya stayed over for 2 nights just to keep her company, missing school just to make sure her best friend was okay. That's the kind of friend Maya was. She'd sacrifice her time, her own plans, just to be there for Tina and for us. Looking back, maybe I took it all for granted. I mean, I just assumed that friendship would always be there, strong and solid. Tina and Maya used to talk about their future, making plans as if nothing could ever get in the way. They dreamed about going to the same college, maybe even moving to the same city one day. It was a given that they'd always be part of each other's lives. There's something funny about how you can get used to things, and maybe I got too comfortable. I don't think I ever imagined that anything could come between them. As far as I was concerned, Maya was family, and family is supposed to stick together, right? So, here's the thing, I didn't see the cracks forming, but now, in hindsight, I wonder if there were small signs. I wonder if there was something more I could have done or noticed. I thought Tina and Maya's bond was unbreakable, that they'd be those lifelong friends you read about, but life has a way of throwing things at you, things you don't expect, things you don't want to believe. If I'd known what was coming, maybe I'd have done something different. Maybe I'd have had a conversation with Tina about loyalty, about values. But back then, there was no way I could have known any of this was going to happen. So, for those years, Maya was part of us, and we were her second family. I believed in her, trusted her, and I had no reason not to. She'd been there through thick and thin, always a stable presence. I never thought anything could shake that. So, a few months ago, Maya started dating this guy, we'll call him Jake. At first, it seemed pretty typical. She was excited, telling Tina all about him, sharing the little details you'd expect. I remember Tina seemed happy for her, even teasing her about finally getting a boyfriend. It was the usual best friend stuff, you know. No one thought much of it. Now, I'm not one to jump to conclusions or try to read too much into teenage relationships, but there was something about Jake that gave me pause. Maybe it was because I'd gotten so used to Maya just being part of our family, and suddenly she was bringing someone else around, someone who didn't quite fit. I tried not to overthink it, though, because Maya was young, and I figured she was just going through that phase we all do, right? Where you get swept up in that first serious relationship and want everyone to meet them and like them. At first, Jake only came over once or twice. He seemed polite enough, shaking my hand, making eye contact, all that good stuff. And sure, he was friendly enough, but there was just something about him that felt off to me. I don't know if it was because I was so used to Maya being this open, bubbly person, and Jake felt like this closed book. He'd answer questions, but there wasn't much personality there. Still, I didn't say anything. I figured I didn't know him well enough to judge. But then, a few weeks into their relationship, Jake started coming around more often. He was over at our place so much that I'd bump into him in the kitchen or the living room. And I'll be honest, I wasn't exactly thrilled. I guess part of me was protective of Maya, even though I had no real reason to be. She was a smart girl, had a good head on her shoulders, and it wasn't my place to meddle. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and it wasn't just about Jake, it was also about Tina. I noticed this shift in her, like she'd suddenly become hyper-aware every time he was around. She'd glance his way a little too often, and sometimes I'd catch her staring, almost like she was lost in thought. I thought, okay, maybe she has a bit of a crush. I mean, they're teenagers, it's not the most shocking thing in the world. She was probably just curious about him since he was Maya's boyfriend, and that's normal, right? I brushed it off. But then these little things started piling up. I'd be sitting in the living room watching TV, and I'd notice Tina practically hovering whenever Jake was around. At one point, she even changed her clothes before coming downstairs, which she'd never done before. That was when I started feeling uneasy, though I still wasn't ready to jump to conclusions. One evening, Maya, Jake, and Tina were all hanging out in the backyard, laughing and talking. I glanced out the window, and something about the way Tina looked at Jake stuck with me. It wasn't the look of someone who's just casually curious, it was that look that teenagers get when they're infatuated. She was smiling, but it was this smile that had a bit too much to it. And Jake, he didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't care. He kept talking to Maya, not a clue on his face. It was one of those moments where I felt like a bystander, just observing something that didn't quite sit right.